Chapter 4 is releasing here in a couple days, but beforehand, we got ourselves a ton of updates, including some drama and controversy about the newest trailer, a ton of rumors about our next main character, Doughy the Doughman, and multiple teases of new VHS tapes and content coming to Chapter 4 in what is my last pre-Chapter 4 video. So firstly, as you guys definitely know, the final gameplay trailer for the 4th chapter just dropped a few days ago, which for the most part, people were actually big fans of, myself included. However, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been quite a bit of controversy around the trailer, because there has, specifically for two reasons: the polishing and the newly revealed character Doughy the Doughman. And first off, starting with the polishing issues, a lot of people who watched the trailer after waiting for so long thought that something seemed off with it, and that certain elements of it looked, I guess, unfinished to certain people. I've seen dozens of comments saying that the lighting is bad and is worse compared to Chapter 3, which I honestly totally disagree with. I actually think the lighting looks super good, and especially in certain frames, they look borderline cinematic. That the animations looked stiff, which I sort of get in maybe a couple of shots where it doesn't look absolutely perfect. But again, I don't see this as a widespread issue, especially with characters like Doughy. And just that there were some general polishing issues people were expecting more from. Like, if we look at this GrabPack hand in this shot, for some reason, it looks just a bit off compared to the ones we've seen in previous games. Or in this screenshot we got to originally tease the trailer, a large chunk of this section was just unrendered, which obviously has left people a bit worried, because if this is the highlights they are showing to sell the game, then maybe the title itself in full is even more glitchy. But I don't know, I think a lot of this stuff is honestly pretty minor, and among all of these general complaints, mob employee Toby actually responded to what everybody was saying when asked if the trailer was the final version of the game that we are going to be playing, to which he said no, and followed with, "A trailer will never be the final version of anything." So while I honestly think most of these issues people are having are extremely minor, either way, it seems like they will hopefully all be polished out in the final version when we get it. But possibly a larger complaint people had was with Doughy the Doughman, the new Chapter 4 character, because Doughy takes on a completely new style for mob, and with all of the hype around his eventual reveal, a lot of fans were disappointed that he in general just doesn't look all that scary and seems a bit unrealistic even for Poppy Playtime, as with every toy up until this point, they have a very disturbing, barely live appearance, since with them being experiments, they feature things like blood and stitches where they were patched together by scientists, which gave them a more horror style versus a character like Doughy that can literally liquidate around. So I guess I understand those complaints, especially since following this, they revealed what is likely the final banner to Chapter 4 featuring Doughy, which has gotten some hilarious comparisons to say the least. Speaking of the trailer though, after it ended up dropping, the devs revealed two new thumbnails showing off the character Doughy, which has led to some interesting speculation. First off, there is this one showing Doughy holding onto a Huggy plush, which honestly doesn't really tell us much. They hold Huggies in every thumbnail for marketing purposes, so I don't expect this one to really imply anything with Doughy or Huggy Wuggy. But a more interesting one is this second thumbnail, which shows Doughy again almost maniacally laughing, grabbing the Huggy plush, but this time we can also see Mommy Longlegs and Catnap drowning inside of his arm, which has led to a lot of different theories, like for instance, people theorizing that Doughy is going to be able to shapeshift and like have the same abilities as these characters, and this is representing him inheriting the powers of previous antagonists, which is interesting because another popular theory being thrown around a lot is that while the developers may have been marketing Doughy as a new ally, he might actually be hiding a dark secret. As for one, the original title of the trailer was called A New Ally, and in the description of the chapter, they again tried to scream at us that he's going to be an ally, not a villain, also doing it on their tweet and basically all marketing, which at first struck me as super weird because they spent so much time marketing this character and acting like he was going to be the most important part of the chapter, even above like Harley Sawyer. I mean, they even put him as, again, what is likely the final banner of the game, something that is usually reserved for the main antagonist of the game. So why all of this marketing for someone who's just going to be another friend alongside Kissy, Poppy, and Ollie? Well, knowing the developers, I wonder if maybe this is all just meant to be complete bait, to try and get us to expect Doughy to be an ally this whole time, just for him to betray us in the actual game. I mean, the thumbnail here already sort of portrays that because he looks almost evil, and if we are right about him being able to shapeshift and use the abilities of previous antagonists, the only way I could see that mattering is if he plans to use them against us. And also, we saw in the Safe Haven mural here, which Doughy seems to be the leader of, that Doughy and the group seemingly hated Poppy. And whether or not these reasons are valid, we literally see ourselves actively working with Poppy multiple times times in chapter 4. So presumably, while Dowie may be an ally to the children, similar to someone like the prototype, we are actively working with somebody they saw as a betrayer who left them for an unknown reason. Not to mention, we are an employee, and again, characters like the prototype we know are trying to kill us in the name of the children we harmed by working at Playtime Co. So maybe Dowie will be luring us in with his friendliness and use our trust as a way to attack us or even get back at Poppy for whatever she did. It's a super interesting theory, especially when you remember that one interview with Zach where he said the material choice and animation of the main villain was going to be important, which would make sense for a morphing character like Dowie. They even mentioned the main villain being a toy, and we heard Poppy in the trailer say, "You lied to me." Something maybe we could hear in an interaction between Dowie and Poppy as we figure out why him and the safe haven had a disliking for her and her character. Also, another small chapter 4 Dowie update I wanted to mention is if you have Poppy Playtime on the Epic Game Store and you load the game up, you can actually see chapter 4's icon right here. You can't click on it or do anything to access the game, although I thought it was a cool update. But moving on from all the theorizing and whatnot, another piece of massive chapter 4 news is again following the release of the chapter 4 trailer. The creator of the Pianosaurus jingle released a couple months ago, Gabriel Brown, announced that not only did he make the Pianosaurus commercial, but also confirmed there would be 3 more jingles and commercial tapes, presumably in the actual game. One for Dowie, one for the Nightmare Critters, and one for Yarnaby, which he even gave us some exclusive little teasers of here.
He's stretchy, he's gummy, he's squishy, he's funny. The fun never ends. Cozy and cuddly, your new best friend, Yarnaby.
So these actually sound amazing. They are pretty short, but especially the Nightmare Critters one, I really like. That one sounds like it's going to have an almost Halloween theme, which would make sense considering their designs, but this is interesting because it means there are going to be VHS tapes, presumably around the game, that give us more of a look into what these toys are and were before they became bigger bodies. And while they kept the teasers brief and didn't tell us too much about what their toy variants were, we can at least infer with the Yarnaby one where they talk about how he is cozy and cuddly, that maybe Yarnaby was meant to be some kind of cuddling stuffed animal that children were meant to hold on to when they sleep, especially since he is made of yarn all over, which could act like some kind of blanket. So that would make sense coming from Mob, since we've seen how obsessed Playtime Co is with toys that make you fall asleep. And as for the Dowie one, I'm pretty confident, as I mentioned before, this one will probably be a VHS that plays before the game itself starts, to hopefully give us an introduction on what he is, because to be honest, we really don't know for now. We could theorize that he's meant to be like Playtime Co.'s own Play-Doh, because he can move and morph around and is literally named Dowie, and Mob likes to take inspiration from real toys like the Care Bears, which inspired the Smiling Critters, or Betty Spaghetti, which inspired Mommy Longlegs. I don't know, and with this being my last pre-chapter 4 video, I guess we will find out when the game releases, so make sure to subscribe to not miss any of that content, and thank you guys.